Good afternoon, and today's lesson is about the cell cycle. Basically, the cell cycle is the main life events of the cell. And so those cell cycle events are much like that of any other organism. They're going to have to grow, they're going to have to prepare to divide, and then they're going to have to make offspring. In a prokaryotic cell, we call this asexual reproduction. And another way of saying this in a prokaryotic cell is by saying binary fission. Binary means to split into two, fission means to break apart. And so over on this side, we can see that we have one cell with our piece of circular DNA in our prokaryotic cell, and during the cell cycle, the DNA is going to duplicate, and then the cell membrane is going to pinch in the middle, and basically we are going to get out two identical cells. So binary fission gives rise to two identical cells. And it's a very simplistic way to come up with offspring. But for those organisms that aren't single cellular, then we need to go through a little bit bigger process. But the cell cycle basically remains the same. And there are several portions of the cell cycle. Now, the reason that we want to go through the cell cycle is that cells need to do one of a few things. One, a cell is going to need to grow. So in the first part of the cell cycle, the cell is going to grow. Then in the second portion, the cell is going to prepare to divide. So it's going to prepare for division. And then after it prepares for division, then we're going to have cell division. Now, why should cells have to divide? Cells divide for several reasons. Sometimes it is to replace old cells. They just get too old, and so we need to replace them. Sometimes we need to replace damaged cells. So replace damaged cells. Other times, our organism needs to grow. And so in order to grow, our cells don't grow themselves more than a certain point. The organism needs more cells as it gets bigger. And then the third reason for cell division is so that we can produce a new life. And that's going to be a different type of cell division in eukaryotic cells, and we'll talk about that at a later date. So let's look at the different phases. The phases are basically given to us, are identified by letter. So the first part of the cell's life, and this is going to be most of the cell's life, we're going to go through the G1 phase, and you can think of G for growth. All right, and so really that's what it's doing. We're getting lots of cell growth. The cell is actually going to get bigger in size. As it's doing this, the cell is going to synthesize different macromolecules, especially proteins. And as with any new organism, as we get new cells, we're going to have to synthesize new organelles. So in G1, the cell's going to grow and it's going to get bigger, and basically you're going from a baby cell to an adult cell. The next phase of the cell cycle is called the S phase, and in the S phase, S stands for synthesis. And what we're synthesizing is new DNA. And so the cell's going to go through what's called DNA replication. In DNA replication, we are making an exact copy of our DNA molecules. So DNA is going to be copied. All right. Now there's a couple of different ways that DNA can be shaped. In the G1, S, and even into G2, the DNA is going to be chromatin. And it's going to be twisted up a little bit, but it's going to basically be in long strands. All right. So the DNA is going to be copied during the S phase, and this usually doesn't take much time. It's fairly a short period of time, and so after the DNA has been replicated or synthesized, we're going to go into the G2 phase. Remember that G stands for growth, but this is going to be a different type of growth. The G2 phase, and especially this 2, is going to be for a different type of growth. We are not growing in size. Instead, we are getting the cell prepared for cell division. So in this cell division, we're going to need to produce new organelles so that the cell can divide them up. We're also going to need to produce new molecules. All right, so we're just getting the cell prepared to grow. The G1, the S phase, and the G2 phase portion of the life cycle is referred to as interphase. So all three of those together is called interphase. The last portion is called the M phase, and M is going to stand for mitosis. There's actually two parts to the M phase. The first part is mitosis, and mitosis is going to stand for nuclear division. That's its actual definition. And in mitosis, the cell is splitting up the DNA. So remember, in the S phase, we've copied all of our DNA, so we actually have two sets of DNA. And during mitosis, we're going to split up those sets to two ends of the cell to create our two new cells. The second part of this is called cytokinesis. And this is going to happen at the end of mitosis. It actually overlaps a little bit. Cytokinesis literally means, cyto means cell, and kinesis means to split. So what we're doing during cytokinesis is splitting the cytoplasm and anything in the cytoplasm. Now, we will go into much greater detail about the events that happen in mitosis in a later video. But for now, understand that mitosis and cytokinesis are the cell division part of our cell cycle. Once we go through cell division, now we are going to have two new cells, and they're each going to go through their cell cycle. They're going to go through that growth phase, that S phase, and that G2 phase during interphase, and then they will split. This only happens when the cell needs to divide. So again, most of its life is spent in the G1 phase. So, the overarching question today was what are the main events of the cell cycle? And during the cell cycle, remember that during the G1 phase, the cell is going to grow. And then during the S and G2 phase, we prepare for cell division. And then during the M phase, we form two new daughter cells through mitosis and cytokinesis. That's the end of today's video. We'll see everybody in class.